We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
There are some puzzling new developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
And I just say, I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to my sister and my brother and my kids and my nephew and Tommy.
She stood in front of millions of viewers. Cameras rolling, the whole world watching. But Savannah Guthrie wasn't delivering the news that morning. She was delivering a plea. Mom, if you can hear this, we love you. We are looking for you. Please come home. That moment stopped America cold. Because this wasn't just a missing person case. This was a daughter, one of the most recognized faces on morning television, begging for her mother's life on live TV. And her mother, Nancy Guthrie, was still out there. Somewhere. Vanished without a trace. But the more investigators dug into this case, the more they realized this wasn't random. This was calculated. Executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And exactly who they were doing it to. This is the Nancy Guthrie case. And we're just getting started. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had lived in the Catalina Foothills area of Tucson, Arizona for over 30 years. Same neighborhood. Same streets. Same routines. She attended church regularly, kept her life structured, and was deeply loved by everyone who knew her. She wasn't in perfect health. Nancy suffered from chronic back pain that limited her movement. She wore hearing aids. She was a woman who depended on her familiar surroundings to stay safe and independent. For 30 years, she was. That all ended on January 31st. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood was quiet that day. It usually is. One of those areas where a strange car would stand out, except on this day, nobody was watching closely enough. At some point on January 31st, Nancy disappeared from her home. No witnesses. No screaming. No violent struggle. She was simply gone. What investigators found when they arrived told a deeply disturbing story. Nancy's phone was still inside. Her purse was there. Her shoes were by the door. Her medication, which an 84-year-old woman would never abandon, was sitting exactly where she left it. Her hearing aids were still in the house. She didn't leave voluntarily. Nobody walks away from everything that keeps them alive. But here's the detail that changes everything. The back door wasn't just open. It was propped open. And we're going to come back to that, because that single detail is the key to this entire case. When a case involves someone this prominent, you'd expect the investigation to be airtight from the very first hour. You'd expect the scene locked down, evidence preserved, forensics handled with precision. That is not what happened here. Richard Carmona, former United States Surgeon General, former Sheriff of Pima County, had a personal connection to the Guthrie family and was involved in the initial response. What unfolded in those critical first hours became one of the most troubling aspects of this case. Because the crime scene wasn't just mishandled. It was corrupted. Within the first 24 hours, delivery drivers were allowed inside the perimeter. A pool crew came through. Landscapers. And then, media personnel were given access as well. This was a potential crime scene, and people were walking through it, potentially destroying the very evidence that could have identified who took Nancy. Evidence that was collected was sent to private laboratories instead of federal ones. And then, within less than 24 hours, the home was released. A standard federal investigation would hold that scene for weeks. Here, the window was under a day. The question that lingers is a hard one. Was this incompetence? Or was it something more deliberate? A compromised scene doesn't just mean lost evidence. It means whoever took Nancy Guthrie may have had a window of protection they never should have had. Now, back to that door. The back door of Nancy's home was propped open. Not blown open by wind. Not left ajar by accident. Propped. Deliberately held in an open position. That word, propped, changes everything. A prop door requires intent. It requires preparation. Someone placed something in that door frame because they needed it open, not for a moment, not by accident, but as part of a plan. A clear exit route. The kind of detail you include in an operation when you know you're going to be carrying someone out of that house quickly. And think about who was being taken. An 84-year-old woman with chronic back pain, limited mobility, hearing aids. A woman who could not resist, could not run, could not call for help fast enough to matter. Whoever did this knew that. They knew her condition. They knew her limitations. They knew her routine, what time she was in certain parts of the house, when the neighborhood went quiet. This was not a stranger picking a random home. This required insider knowledge. Someone had studied her life from close enough to know exactly when and how to move. They came prepared. And the Ring camera, the one device that could have captured everything, was physically removed. Not glitched. Not disabled remotely. Taken. Whoever did this knew that camera was there, and they made sure it couldn't talk. Everything left behind, the phone, purse, shoes, medication, hearing aids, was left intentionally. To make it look, at first glance, like Nancy had wandered off. A welfare situation, not a crime. But nobody wanders off without their shoes. Nobody leaves voluntarily without their medication. Nancy Guthrie was taken out the back door. And someone planned every detail of how to do it. In late March, the FBI returned to Catalina Foothills with new focus. This time, they weren't just looking at the house. They were looking at the neighborhood. Vacant properties nearby. Construction sites. Active contractors and landscaping crews with regular access to those streets. This tells us something important about where the investigation was heading. They were building a profile of someone who belonged in that neighborhood without appearing to belong. Someone who moved through those streets in a work vehicle without drawing a second glance. Someone the neighbors had stopped noticing. And then there's January 11th, 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. A suspicious man was spotted in the area near her home. 3 weeks. That's not coincidence. That's reconnaissance. Someone studying the landscape, timing the gaps in activity, learning when the street was empty enough to move. The profile is chilling. Physically capable. Driving a work-style vehicle. Familiar with the neighborhood schedule. Disciplined enough to execute this without being caught on camera or identified by a witness. Someone with a reason to be there, or at least, a reason that looked legitimate. In the critical window surrounding Nancy's disappearance, there was complete digital silence. No cell pings. No GPS activity. Nothing. Combined with everything else, the prop door, the removed camera, the items deliberately left behind, this silence looks less like coincidence and more like professional planning. Burner phones. Signal awareness. A deliberate decision to leave no digital trail. This person understood that modern investigations begin with data, and they made sure there was none to find. But two communications did surface that investigators took seriously. The first, a demand for money. A ransom-style message suggesting Nancy was alive at the time it was sent. The second, an apparent apology. A message with a tone of regret, suggesting things had gone wrong. That the situation had developed in a way the sender hadn't intended. Read together, those messages point to one conclusion: someone took Nancy Guthrie for financial gain. And at some point, something changed. The plan fell apart. Someone panicked. In the background of all this, investigators have been deploying advanced DNA analysis combined with genetic genealogy, the same technology that cracked the Golden State Killer case after decades. It works by identifying suspects through their distant relatives, building a family tree backwards until a name appears. If any biological evidence survived that compromised scene, this technology can reach people who believe they've left no trace at all. This case sits at a brutal crossroads. On one side, a crime scene opened too early, contaminated by too many people, processed in a way that may have cost investigators evidence they can never recover. On the other, new FBI focus, new forensic tools, and 2 messages that suggest someone out there knows exactly what happened. The question that hangs over everything is still unanswered. Where is Nancy Guthrie? And underneath that is the question investigators are circling right now. Was this a local, familiar face, someone Nancy recognized at her door, a landscaper, a contractor, someone she let in without fear? Or was this a professional predator, someone who moves through neighborhoods studying the vulnerable, executing with precision that suggests this wasn't his first time? Both answers are terrifying. And the truth may lie somewhere between them. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. If you know anything at all, about January 31st in the Catalina Foothills, contact the FBI tip line linked in the description below. If this case matters to you, hit that like button right now. Share this video. Because sometimes the right person sees something like this and remembers a detail they thought didn't matter. That one tip could change everything. Subscribe to the Case Code. We follow the cases that refuse to be forgotten. We'll keep covering this one until there are answers. Nancy Guthrie. Still missing. Still worth fighting for.